The black waitress had spent years pulling double shifts at a rundown diner, barely earning enough to scrape by. But no matter how bone-deep the exhaustion ran, she never let it steal her kindness. So when Serena Carter spotted a frail boy in a battered wheelchair shivering in the rain just outside the window, she didn't hesitate. She wiped her hands, pushed through the glass door into the storm, and brought him inside. She gave him a warm meal, a dry towel, and something far rarer, safety. Across the street, a billionaire watched. That billionaire was the boy's father. And her quiet act of compassion? It was about to change everything. Rain fell in relentless sheets, hammering the cracked sidewalk of Lexington Avenue and turning it into a slick maze of puddles. The flickering street lamps cast a dim, uncertain glow on the sagging buildings that lined the block. It was late, past 11 o'clock, and the diner was supposed to be closed. But Serena Carter had never been the kind of woman to turn someone away. Not when they were alone. Not when the world had already done enough to beat them down. She was wiping down the counter, the sweat on her chestnut-brown skin still glistening from a grueling 12-hour shift, when she noticed him, a small figure just outside, slumped in a wheelchair beneath the buzz of the neon Lexington Diner sign. The boy's dark hair was soaked and clinging to his forehead. A threadbare coat hung from his narrow shoulders, useless against the chill. His hands gripped a frayed blanket, his lips trembling as the cold rain soaked him through. Serena's brow creased. She dropped the rag and moved without a second thought. The wind slapped against her as she pushed open the diner door. "Hey, sweetie," she called softly, crouching beside him. "What are you doing out here all alone?" The boy flinched at first, then turned to look up at her. His blue eyes were wide, cautious. "I'm waiting for my dad," he mumbled, voice nearly drowned by the rain. Serena scanned the street. Nothing. Just the flickering pawn shop sign across the road and the sound of tires hissing over wet asphalt. "Where is he?" she asked gently, concern growing. The boy shrugged and pulled the blanket tighter. Serena sighed and bit her lip. She had seen too many kids like this, left waiting, forgotten. "You can't stay out here in this mess," she said with a warm smile. "Come inside with me, okay? It's warm. And I've got something special for you." He hesitated. Just for a second. Then he gave the tiniest nod. Serena gripped the handles of the wheelchair and guided him into the diner, the heat embracing them instantly. The familiar scent of buttered toast and burnt coffee curled around them like a hug. She led him to a booth near the radiator, draped a fresh towel over his shoulders, and crouched beside him once more. "I'm Serena," she said with a grin. "What's your name, sweetheart?" The boy sniffled, gripping the edge of the blanket. "Daniel." Serena smiled. "That's a strong name. You hungry?" He nodded, shyly. She didn't wait for him to speak again. She was already moving, already slicing into a fresh loaf of sourdough in the kitchen. Minutes later, she placed a plate in front of him, golden, buttery grilled cheese beside a steaming bowl of tomato soup. Her grandmother's recipe. A comfort meal for cold nights and heavy hearts. "This one's on me," she said, tucking a napkin into his lap. Daniel took his first bite, his blue eyes going wide. This is the best thing I've ever had," he whispered, wonder in his voice. Serena chuckled, watching him devour the sandwich. "Good food makes everything better," she said softly. But inside, her heart ached. Because she knew that look, that weary tension on a face too young to wear it. What she didn't know, however, was that someone had been watching. Someone powerful. Someone who didn't believe in kindness. But who did believe in debts? And Serena Carter had just put him in hers. Raymond's gaze didn't waver. "No," he said simply. "I'm here to thank you." Serena blinked, stunned for a moment. Of all the things she expected, a warning, a threat, maybe even a bribe, gratitude wasn't one of them. She crossed her arms, shoulders squaring. You sure have a strange way of showing it. Sending a woman to collect him like a piece of luggage. Watching from across the street without saying a word. That didn't feel like gratitude. That felt like surveillance. Raymond didn't flinch. He stepped forward slightly, just enough to command presence but not cross the threshold. I didn't know how to approach you. I still don't. My life. It doesn't leave room for people like you. Serena raised an eyebrow. People like me? His expression shifted, not in panic, but in awareness. I don't mean that the way it sounds. I mean, people who do the right thing without a motive. Who act on compassion instead of calculation. That's not the world I live in. She studied him in silence, heart still thudding from the unexpected confrontation. There was something guarded about him, like a man who'd spent his life locking doors behind him just to survive. But underneath it all, beneath the cold gray eyes, the suit, the rain-dampened arrogance, there was something else. Something that resembled guilt. I didn't help your son for praise or thanks, Serena said after a beat. I helped him because he needed it. That's what people are supposed to do. Raymond nodded once. Which is exactly why I'm here. You did more than help. You reminded my son, and me, that kindness still exists. Serena shook her head, her voice low. You don't owe me anything, Mr. Holt. Just take care of him. Be there when you say you will. That's what matters. Raymond hesitated. That's the thing. I do owe you. More than you know. Before she could respond, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, black envelope. This isn't a check. It's not hush money. Inside is an invitation. I'm hosting a private gala this weekend, quiet, selective, but important. I want you there. Serena frowned. Why? He looked her dead in the eye. Because I want to see what you do with a room full of doors no one's ever opened for you. Her lips parted slightly. The weight of what he was saying hung in the air. This wasn't just a gesture. It was a test. A bridge. A gamble. And if I say no? Then you say no, Raymond replied. But I hope you don't. My world could use someone like you in it. He set the envelope on the edge of her doorframe and turned without another word, descending the stairs in silence. Serena stood frozen, staring after him. She waited until the sound of his steps had vanished before reaching for the envelope, fingers trembling just slightly. Inside was a single gold-foiled card. Holt Foundation Gala, invitation for Serena Carter, guest of honor. She stared at the embossed lettering, heart pounding. She hadn't expected any of this. Not the boy. Not the billionaire. And certainly not an invitation to a world that had always been closed to her. She looked around her tiny apartment, the peeling paint, the flickering overhead light, the envelope glowing faintly in her hand like a portal to another life. And she whispered to herself, what the hell is happening? 3 days later, the Holt Foundation Gala. The ballroom inside the Holt Center was a sea of elegance, crystal chandeliers, champagne fountains, and sharp conversations whispered beneath string quartets. The city's elite were here, tech CEOs, politicians, media giants. Everyone dripping in money and influence. And then there was Serena. She stood near the entrance in a midnight blue gown that hugged her form like it had been made for her, which, in fact, it had. The morning after Raymond's visit, a courier had arrived with a tailored dress, shoes, and a simple note, let them see who you really are. It hadn't said who sent it, but she knew. Heads turned as she walked into the room, not because of scandal, but because of presence. She didn't wear her poverty like shame. She wore her grace like armor. Raymond approached from across the floor, dressed in a bespoke tuxedo, but his eyes softened the moment they landed on her. You came, he said, almost in disbelief. I almost didn't, she admitted, but then I thought, if you're going to give me a seat at the table, I might as well flip it. He actually smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. A waiter approached with flutes of champagne, but Serena declined. Not tonight. I want a clear head for whatever game is being played here. No games, Raymond replied. Just truths. There's someone I want you to meet. He led her through the ballroom to a raised dais where board members and corporate giants chatted. Standing near the center was a thin man with a silver tie clip and the wary eyes of someone used to judging people before they spoke. This is Harold Quinn, Raymond said. Chairman of the Holt Education Initiative. Harold, this is Serena Carter. She's the reason I'm rethinking how we staff our urban grant programs. Harold's eyebrows rose. The waitress? Serena didn't flinch. The waitress who saved your CEO's son from a night in the rain and reminded him that humanity isn't a luxury. There was a long pause before Harold chuckled. Well said. Raymond's voice cut in, low and firm. Serena is going to be the new outreach director for our Baltimore community expansion. Serena's head snapped toward him. Excuse me. I've already filed the paperwork, he said calmly. Salary. Benefits. Full autonomy. You'll be the bridge between our ivory tower and the streets you know better than any of us ever could. Why me? She asked, her voice quiet. Because you didn't ask for this, he said. And because you're the only person I've met in 20 years who made me feel like I owed the world more than profit. 2 months later. The old community center on West Fayette Street had been gutted and rebuilt. New paint, new tech labs, after-school programs, job training, and a full-service cafe that provided jobs to teens and returning citizens. At the front, beneath the new banner that read Carter Center for Community Empowerment, Serena stood with a mic in her hand and Daniel by her side, a wide smile on his face. Reporters took photos. Parents cried. Raymond stood quietly off to the side, watching as the woman who had once offered his son soup in a storm now stood at the helm of something far bigger. When she finished her speech, Serena walked over to him, eyes shining. This is just the beginning, she said. Raymond nodded. It's your world now. I'm just lucky you let me be a part of it. Serena looked toward Daniel, who was now racing with the other kids in his new wheelchair. Then she smiled. Kindness isn't weakness, Raymond. It's the foundation. And this time, he believed her. 6 months later, the rise of the Carter Initiative. The Carter Center had become more than a community space. It had become a movement. What started with tutoring sessions and job fairs now included business incubators, financial literacy programs, and a youth policy council. Media coverage was pouring in, and Serena, once invisible to the world, was now the subject of op-eds, podcasts, and morning show features. But not everyone was pleased. Some board members in the Holt Foundation, old money men with rigid agendas, began to question Serena's growing power. This is not what we envisioned, one said in a closed-door meeting. She's pulling focus from the foundation. It's starting to look like her empire, not ours. Raymond, seated at the head of the table, looked them in the eyes and said, then maybe it's time we stop thinking of it as ours. The room fell silent. But the resistance didn't end there. Anonymous whispers. A week later, an anonymous article surfaced online accusing Serena of inflating numbers, misallocating funds, and leveraging her relationship with Raymond for personal gain. The piece spread fast, pushed by bots and political influencers who saw the Carter Initiative as too radical, too black, too independent. Reporters began circling. Volunteers grew tense. Even Daniel started noticing the shift, how his friends whispered about his mom behind closed doors. Serena stood in her office, staring out the window as rain streaked the glass. Her hands trembled slightly. They're trying to take it all back, she whispered to herself. They're trying to make me small again. Raymond entered quietly behind her. He didn't speak. Just walked over and placed a single folder on her desk. Inside were documents, forensic audits, transparent accounting, glowing internal reports. I knew they'd come, he said. So I kept records. Every donation, every receipt, every salary. You've been cleaner than anyone on the board. You're not the problem, Serena. You're the threat. She looked up at him, eyes glassy but burning. Then let's be a threat worth remembering. The press conference, burn it down with the truth. 2 days later, Serena stood at a podium in the Carter Center's community auditorium. Press filled the room. The story was at a boiling point. Cameras rolled. The room went quiet. I didn't build this place to protect my image, she said. I built it because people like me never get second chances. Because I was tired of watching brilliance rot in silence. And if that makes me dangerous to the establishment, then so be it. She held up the audit folder Raymond had given her. Every number is here. Every truth. I won't defend integrity to people who profit from its absence. Murmurs swept the room. Then she stepped from the podium and gestured to a group of young adults standing behind her, former foster youth, undocumented students, single moms. These are the people we fight for. And we're not done. The crowd erupted in applause. Some stood. Some wept. Raymond, standing in the back, whispered to himself, she just flipped the board. Aftermath, redemption, rebuilding, and legacy. The smear campaign backfired. Public support for Serena surged. Investigations into the Holt Foundation's old guard were opened. Several board members resigned quietly. Others tried to ride Serena's wave, but she made it clear, this was a movement, not a ladder. She restructured the board. Opened it to community leaders, educators, small business owners, and youth voices. Raymond stepped down as CEO, transitioning into a supporting role, finally at peace with giving the reins to someone who had earned them with fire and grace. 1 year later, the time capsule ceremony. On the anniversary of the stormy night that changed everything, Serena hosted a community festival at the Carter Center. Families gathered. Food trucks lined the street. A brass band played as children danced beneath murals that told the story of transformation. Daniel, now thriving and confident, stood beside his dad and handed Serena a small silver box, the community time capsule. She knelt down with a smile. What's inside? He grinned. A grilled cheese sandwich. Well, a plastic one. And a note. The crowd laughed. She opened the box and read the note aloud, to the future, never forget that one act of kindness can change everything. Love, Daniel. A hush fell over the gathering. And then applause, long, thunderous, overwhelming, the power of a name. The Carter Center wasn't just a building anymore. It had become a name, one whispered in political circles, shouted from stages at youth rallies, and printed in bold across national headlines. And yet, despite all the success, Serena Carter never let the mission drift. She walked the halls of the center every morning like she had something to prove, because in her mind, she still did. She greeted janitors by name. She joined GED tutoring sessions when a student felt discouraged. She sat with mothers dealing with eviction notices and walked them through city housing resources herself. And every Friday, without fail, she returned to the very diner where she had once worked double shifts in silence, ordering the same grilled cheese sandwich and sweet tea with lemon. It reminded her of who she was before the world knew her name. One afternoon, a young server nervously approached her table. You're her, right? Serena Carter. Serena looked up, smiled warmly, and nodded. I am. The young woman bit her lip, then sat across from her uninvited. My little brother is in the after-school music program at the Carter Center. He's never stuck with anything in his life, but he won't stop talking about it. You gave him a trumpet last week. Serena smiled again. No. The community gave it to him. I just signed the invoice. The girl reached across the table and grabbed Serena's hand. "Thank you. You changed his life." Serena's eyes softened. She had heard versions of this before, grateful families, emotional parents, teens who found hope, but something about the way this girl said it, trembling with sincerity, made her remember the stormy night that started it all. The night she gave a sandwich to a stranger in a soaked business suit. That one act. That one spark. New storms on the horizon. But just as the tides had once lifted her, new storms approached. The city council had grown wary of the Carter Center's influence. Developers, sensing opportunity in the community's rising profile, began buying up nearby properties and pushing out longtime residents. The term gentrification began creeping into community meetings like a bad smell no one wanted to name. One morning, Serena attended a zoning board meeting. The room was packed with developers in expensive suits, armed with charts and buzzwords: urban renewal, economic potential, new growth. Serena rose to speak. "You use words like blight and revitalization to justify removing families from homes they've lived in for decades. You call this progress, but progress for who?" A few people clapped. Others shifted uncomfortably. A commissioner leaned forward. "With all due respect, Miss Carter, philanthropy isn't policy. We're trying to grow this city." Serena stepped forward. "Then grow it with us, not over us." The moment was electric. The clip went viral. But the battle had only begun. Raymond, watching the clip on his phone from his now quiet estate, smiled. She had learned how to fight, and now, she wasn't just fighting for herself. Seeds of legacy. The following months were war, meetings, marches, legal filings. Serena worked with housing advocates to create the Roots Initiative, helping longtime renters purchase their homes through community land trusts. She called on local banks to provide zero-interest loans and met resistance at every turn. But she had one powerful ally, Raymond Holt. Now retired from the foundation's day-to-day, he still commanded respect, and when he spoke at a public summit in support of the Roots Initiative, even the cynics had to take notice. "I spent decades building towers," he said to the crowd. "But I never built a home. Serena Carter did. And I stand behind her with every dollar and every ounce of influence I've got left." That day, 5 major banks signed on to the Roots Initiative. Raymond's voice, once a symbol of corporate distance, had now become a tool for justice.